Back in Fortnite, we're taking a look at the game's latest update that brings in a RTX update. That means we get NVIDIA DLSS and NVIDIA Reflex. So we've got some details we're going to be going over and kind of showing it off. So immediately, right off the bat, I was testing out the game at full settings, 4K across the different options of having DLSS on or off. I also tried 1440p, and we're going to kind of be comparing the differences here. Now, I wasn't able to record lower resolution than 4K because I kept crashing for some reason when I adjusted, but I did check those out, so we do have the settings and information in that regard. And you're seeing how I'm kind of switching here. So now we're on the balance setting, so you can see the difference in frames. Okay, so on average, like I mentioned, 1440p is about 10 frames higher when we go down from 4K. Balanced DLSS, we're getting 30 FPS average. When we reach performance mode, we're getting about 40 FPS. If you have DLSS off, you're getting about 15 to 20 FPS. It's very, very unplayable. And when you're going for quality, you're getting about 20 FPS. Now, context matters too. This is a RTX 2080 Ti with an i9 9900K. Just so that you are aware of that aspect. I am recording on top of the work I'm doing, but it doesn't really seem to have too much of a variation on the actual performance. So I'm going to show off two larger matches here because we were kind of playing around back and forth with the different settings there, showing off the FPS kind of counters on the different things, quickly switching between them and some of the features. But we're going to dive into that. So right here, we're playing with the actual performance mode on. You're seeing we're getting, pretty not great FPS, but we're getting decent FPS. And again, this is ray tracing. This is a next generation feature. This is pushing the technology. I'm sorry if it's choppy, but that's just what we're trying to see is how it performs on this card, how much work it takes to do ray tracing, and that's why you're seeing that. Obviously, for playing games, you take off ray tracing, and I tested that on here too. I'm getting native 4K all settings on, 60 FPS basically locked. When I look around a little bit, small little dips, but it goes right back up to 60. Perfectly fine. I was thinking of like lowering things and trying that out, but I mean, if I'm getting 4K at that setting, there's no point really changing it past that because I don't have a screen that goes higher and I don't need to. So this is a competitive game for most people. For me, I really don't care. But, for a lot of people, it's a competitive experience, so you want frames, so you kind of think of the ray tracing things as something that are perhaps unnecessary for the regular player. But it's cool to see it integrated because ray tracing is one of those features that is, kind of in the future of gaming and is going to be more and more common, especially with the next generation consoles supporting it. So with ray tracing, it's a cool effect. It really does help create a more dynamic, realistic environment. So that's cool to see, and it's also great that Fortnite continues to embrace modern technology and even future technology. They really push for crossplay and everything like that. So what I'm doing mostly in these two matches that I'm going to be showing is features that specifically show off the shadows and the lighting and the reflections that are present. So that's really, really cool. So the first thing is the reflections. They're a big deal, right? So we're getting ray traced reflections. This setting adds beautiful, realistic, super accurate reflections to bodies of water and other suitably reflective surfaces in Fortnite. See game detail, characters, enemies, weapon effects, and more perfectly reflected throughout the world. There's also improved lighting, as light sources and other illumination will be accurately reflected onto nearby sources and objects, making gameplay look and feel more dynamic. So you're seeing that when I go across the windows there. Again, I wanted to have the perfect video capture back and forth, but I was also getting crashes later when I turned off ray tracing. I don't know what it is. Maybe it has something to do with the DirectX. Anyways, I couldn't play around with it too much longer, trying to save time. Anyways, because it's just, it's kind of blank windows and stuff, but when you get this ray tracing reflection applied, it's perfectly matching everything you're doing. The shooting, the particle effects, the smoke on a reload, everything like that is just perfectly reflected in the glass there, and it looks fantastic. Now again, it's a niche thing, you're only seeing it in a couple areas. I should also mention that I always tried to land in this area here. I was very fortunate for that to happen most times so that I could have that basis of comparison, because it's almost impossible to compare all of these settings because you're not getting the exact same gameplay experience every time. Different people moving different ways and the environment being shifted. I also noticed that night seems to have a bit more of an impact. You lose quite a few more frames there. Not quite a few, but you lose a few more frames during the night on any of the settings. Great. So now we can talk about ray trace shadows. So with ray tracing enabled, Fortnite's dynamic shadows get a significant upgrade, enabling them to realistically stretch across the scene with accurate softening as the distance from the shadow source increases. Particularly of note is the enhanced resolution of ray trace shadows. You can see this clearly in fine detail shadows, such as those created by chain link fences. Furthermore, ray trace shadows dynamically update as the time of day changes with effectively infinite precision. So I'm going to be looking around at a lot of little objects, and I hope you've been doing that at the same time that I've been playing here too. Look at the smaller things in the world, how they all have perfectly set shadows for them. Every object, every item, everything has a perfect shadow cast to it. Even the floors here, the reflections, beautiful. It's small little details like that that help create more realistic worlds. Even this paneling here, and I think this is a really cool effect, you could perfectly see the reflections. But notice how crisp and sharp those shadows are on every single object. Later on, I'm going to be looking inside stores on like shelves, and even the little items on the shelves have that reflection. It's crazy. And those casting shadows, it's beautiful in regards to really creating a great looking world. And can I say in general, actually visually, this game is fairly impressive these days. It really does look great. So we have ray traced ambient inclusion, where objects or surfaces meet, light is occluded, creating subtle shadows. In games, this ambient occlusion AO is key to grounding objects in the smallest details. With ray tracing, they're able to produce more AO shadowing, far more accurate, further improving the fidelity of Fortnite. And I hope this does look good, because I think it looks way better than when I usually play it on console. Again, I don't play it too often. It's been a while since I've been back. They have cars and a whole Marvel thing going on. I'm totally out of the loop, I guess, because it's just not something I play too often. So there's also ray trace global illumination. Fortnite's maps and worlds are composed of dynamically built and destroyed objects, preventing pre-baked light interaction. Due to this, skylights provide the only real-time environmental lighting. Ray trace global illumination adds additional bounce light that is otherwise impossible to simulate in the game. And it looks great. I love the glowing effect here too at night on the weapons and everything like that. I think it looks really, really cool, and it makes the stuff stand out quite a bit. So, you know, they do some recommendation details and everything like that, you know, getting better performance. I think the next generation cards and stuff are definitely going to handle this a little bit better. But I was kind of impressed by what this provides. Again, it's smaller details, it's smaller changes in the world, like subtle changes, and you take a huge performance hit. So for most players, this isn't necessarily something you'll want or you'll care about. Obviously, as you know, you change the resolution down, you're able to handle it better and better. And if you have the new 30 line, if you're lucky to get hands on that, it's going to run better. Of course, there's more performance there. And I'm just testing with my super expensive card that got kind of dwarfed by cheaper options that this is what it provides. And it's really cool. And it's great to see this technology continue to grow and change and be integrated into different games. They've done a pretty neat job of this, and I can't wait to see how it kind of runs on the console side of things, because they're going to have ray tracing. And perhaps someday if I'm upgrading, you know, future graphics cards, because they should be able to quite well get this running perfectly fine. Not necessarily at like a native 4K resolution, I'm not saying that, but with the really magical effect of DLSS, you're going to be seeing, you know, this be capable, this image recreation that DLSS does, because I mentioned a few times, you might not know what it is basically sort of you taking a lower formatting and you're upscaling it. And the image quality difference, you really can't tell much of a whole difference between the two. It's quite impressive what they've been able to achieve with this AI upscaling. It looks really, really cool. So this one, we're going up to balanced kind of gameplay there. Again, seeing that 30 FPS marker. I would not suggest having ray tracing on if you're not putting some form of DLSS into play, because it's going to be unplayable. It's not a good time. Even at like 30 something FPS, it's really not the best experience. I still can compete, but I know most players are not going to like that because it's just not smooth or fine-tuned. And obviously the best way to play is without ray tracing enabled, because you're going to get a lot more frames. It's going to be a lot smoother. But it's cool to see That's the thing, right? That's really what this technology, and I guess that's why some people might say it's a gimmick, but this is the future of gaming, technology-wise. This is where it's going to head. I know we're not quite there yet, but this is how every new technology gets developed when it comes to gaming, is they deploy it. It doesn't run great initially, but over time we get better and better hardware that's able to run it. And you're going to just see such beautiful, gorgeous worlds with ray tracing enabled that it will blow your mind once you get into it and go across here. So again, I do apologize for the low FPS, but that's just how it is with this type of like visual setting. It doesn't run super fluidly. DLSS helps a lot, like a ton. But it's still not perfect, and they keep working on making it better and better. And I'd say it's kind of a miraculous thing, because in the past you didn't really have something like this AI in here to assist with the visual quality. You just didn't, and you had to deal with the drops in frames, and people didn't care as much now, but we care about performance and we want resolution. So it's neat to see, and I think this is a huge kind of gameplay advantage, especially if you can get this running at a decent enough frame rate for yourself, because you can see those reflections in the windows, whereas other people basically see nothing at all here, and it makes a big difference. Like, this is super cool to see. It doesn't perhaps seem like something super cool, but it's amazing. It really is to have that accurate of a representation of the world, even like in the water, seeing that, on the floor, seeing that, the reflections, seeing the shadow casting, the light softness that the world sort of gets with the ray tracing effect deployed. It looks really, really cool. I think they've done a wonderful job with the implementation. I'm going to stop going over anything at this point. You can just enjoy the rest of it, but I hope this kind of gave you context into what ray tracing provides and why it's such an interesting technology that is something you should, keep your eye out for and look into further, especially if you're going to be someone that's doing next generation gaming, because it's going to be current before you know it, and this is going to be something it's going to become a lot more of a standard. And thank you, Captain America, for the save there.